So why printmaking? Why did I choose dyeing art for a communications medium that is no longer considered industry standard or even really that valuable without going to great expense for it? Why do I have a World War II era piece of machinery that specializes in cutting paper? What is it about these things that makes me so compelled towards wanting to have them and fight for them and play with them? The answer is because printmaking is single-handedly responsible for the spread of human consciousness. Printmaking is the medium that brought us out of the Dark Ages. It has always been used to disrupt imbalances of power, to rally the people around common values and shared values against totalitarian regimes. It single-handedly uprooted the power of the Catholic Church as a totalitarian dominating force of culture when Lutheran decided to promote Protestantism and changed the face of Christianity as we know it. It has a very long, interesting, and fascinating history. Someone had to cut the letters, make the paper, bind the books. When you think about the classics that we still study in schools, one of the reasons that we study them is because of the cultural narrative that they told of that time, right? But the printmaker was someone who wanted to carry that vision forward, right? Like they're trying to make a document to talk to the people about ourselves through story. It's the beauty of storytelling, and the printmaker was the crafter of stories. They were the person who set the letters of the words so that the other people could absorb them. They were always a facilitator or a mediator. The history of printmaking, particularly letterpress, is the history of graphic design. It is the foundation of the industry in which I inhabit. It's a dying form of art, but it produces something that digital media simply can't replace because it uses pressure as a part of its construction. You have to understand color theory and how the spectrum of light works. You have to understand paper densities and how your environment impacts your paper, but also like humidity and moisture and things like that. There's a lot of paper science that goes into it, a lot of material sciences that go into it. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it when you're talking about structural dynamics and how to craft, boxes or things. And so it's part engineering, part communication, part art. It's a lot of things. Like it's the merger of everything I love. It's somewhere between science and art and humanities. But it is also deeply rooted in activism and being a voice of the people. So I used my studio as an opportunity for the community to come together and to tell me their stories, and then I would translate that into art. I would extract it. It was a way for me to get to know everyone around me and to share something with them that made their idea beautiful, right? And so, and I love that. I love to get it to be a part of their idea, and I love to get to make it beautiful. And the other reason that I love printmaking is because women were not allowed in the press room. Not super far long ago in our history, women were only allowed in the print shop if they were putting type away. They were allowed to put type away in drawers. And so there's a saying that is almost always spoken to women and children, and it's mind your P's and Q's. Mind your P's and Q's. It's an old print room saying because the P and the Q can go next to each other in a drawer, and they are mirror image typefaces. So if you aren't paying attention, The thing about letterpress is that it's upside down and backwards. Everything is mirror image. So when you're looking at it, you need to know that you're looking at the right letter because you're actually looking at the letter backwards. P's and B's and D's can get really confusing. W's and M's can get really confusing if you don't know which way is up. And P's and Q's can get reversed. So to be told to mind your P's and Q's was an instruction to be mindful of which type you put in which spot. But it was usually only spoken to women, and so it became a colloquial term that is incredibly sexist in order to tell women to stay in their lane or to stay where they belong, be put where they belong. Same for children. Super misogynistic. Like there's so much misogyny rooted in that statement that one of the reasons why I love printmaking is to dismantle all of these things. This idea that women weren't smart enough to use the craft, that women weren't able to run the machines, that they would just mess everything up. The only thing that they were allowed to do was the very detailed work of putting type away in a drawer. Also, type drawers are very heavy because they're made of lead. So you also have to be somewhat strong in order to be able to even deal with the space, even just pulling them in and out. Like it's a big drawer full of metal. So somehow they were strong enough to have that task, and they were smart enough to handle the detail-oriented work of putting it all away, but they weren't smart enough or able enough or strong enough to actually run the machines themselves. So for me, it's an expression of my feminism to have a voice through these machines and through this studio, because the female voice is often repressed, dismissed, denied, rejected. That is sexism. And Letterpress gives me an opportunity to have that without my gender getting in the way. People can see the idea and hear the idea and connect with it regardless of what they think I am. So it's a bias breaking medium as well. It's a place where I explore the human condition because that's what it was always about. And it's also a place where I get to talk about relationships and the dynamics that, bring us together or pull us apart. Because both of those are happening all the time. We're always coming together and coming apart. And Letterpress, because I can manipulate each letter by hand, gives me an opportunity to play in this space. It gives me an opportunity to mix letters, which is called Hellbox type. And in Hellbox type, you get to explore ideas like unity and diversity, complexity of thought. You also force somebody to actually look at it in order to read it. So it's like a deeper level of invested engagement. And I use this to make art that makes people feel inspired or comforted or loved or human in their spaces or between their relationships. And this is why I do Letterpress, because I can do really small cards, which are like business card size. Those are for people that you don't know, but you want to express something to. So I have the first and last word cards because they're like conversation starters and enders. You can scale that up and go to like the greeting card size. I do greeting cards because that's a conversation that you have with someone that you actually know. And so I made this very personal and much more intimate in their expression because that's what the medium is for. I do poster work because poster work is all about communicating in a wider space. Maybe you don't know the person that's going to read it, so you're trying to project something about you to somebody else in the room, like your value system or things that you believe in, or you are trying to readily affirm yourself. And so that's where I do a lot of public affirmation stuff as well. This is how I engage the medium. I make journals and art books because those are places where you get to keep yourself, right? Like that's a you. And Letterpress is a place where I get to explore all of these different human relationships and the ways in which we explore communication and dialogue throughout every aspect of our human engaged social lives. So for me, it is a form of social impact. I am also a social impact strategist, and so I use it as a way of just exploring human connection, exploring identity, and exploring humanity without being tied to religious sentiments specifically, or the markers of identity that have a tendency to divide us. I try to focus on all expressions that have a unifying effect, because that's the hope that I get, is that it crosses those identity boundaries and it brings people together and not apart. That's why Letterpress.